We all know the drill by now. I gotta let that be done. We all know what I say when I say these things, so I'll keep it kind of short. My friend in the Seattle area, Jean here, and I started this series. What was it, in March or in April? In the early days of the pandemic, when it became clear that we were going to be inside for quite a while. I didn't envision it being this long, but here we are. Um, it seems like forever. Um, so our next readers next week, it will be Charles Bernstein. And then on August 2nd, Jean and I are going to read together. And then we will be gone for a while, or, at least for a while. We're not, our plans are still up in the air. So Jean is going to be the one introducing our reader today, Lissa Wolsak. I hope I've said your name correctly. I don't think I've ever said it out loud before. So I'll tell you a little bit about Jean. She is an excellent poet and critic. Her most recent book of poetry is Mood Indigo from Selva Oscura. And she has also recently published Incapacity from Chiasmus. And there are two recent critical books, I should know this by heart by now, The Transmutation of Love and Avant-Garde Poetics from University of Alabama, and Thinking and Writing Poetry, co-edited with Tyrone Williams out of the University of New Mexico Press. And Jean is professor of interdisciplinary arts and sciences at the University of Washington at Bothell. And now here she is.
Okay, thanks, Ray. I am delighted to introduce Lissa Wolsak for today's ENCLAVE reading. I first became acquainted with Lissa's work in the mid-1990s when, as several commentators have noted, Lissa Wolsak burst into the poetry scene. A fully realized poet with seemingly no work, at least no published work behind her. There were three stunning works: her 1994 Garcia Family Co-Mercy, her 1999 Heuristic Prolusion, and her 2000 pen Chants, or 12 Spirit-like Impermanences. I was introduced to Lissa's work because of relationship between Seattle's Subtext Collective and Vancouver's Kootenai School. Lissa was living in Vancouver and also made visits to Seattle, and as I made visits to Vancouver. Lissa was then in her 40s, heading toward 50, as was I, and her presence was quite extraordinary for me. In reading her work, I was transported, so much so that I felt I needed new ideas in order to take in this work. I began with the thought that the concept of language as material was not adequate and even obfuscating, and that one must think of language as a medium, if with material properties. What was important for me in this idea drawn from Lissa's work was that not only might one think of the poet as a medium, but language itself as a medium. With language as a medium, there is no hierarchy or division between language and world, the metaphysical and the empirical, the poet and her poetry. Each is in a dynamic relationship with each other. As Giorgio Agamben puts it in The End of the Poem, what is lived and what is poeticized are truly only what is made in speech, or as he also writes, to discover that one is one's language is shamanistic. An heuristic prolusion is Wolsak's important early statement of her poetics, a masterpiece of generosity and evocation, in which she establishes her poetics of presence via absence. She begins with a quotation from Michel de Certeau: "Why write, if not in the name of an impossible speech?" And she invokes Paul Celan's poetics of despair and hope. This is Celan. Came, a word came through the night, wanted to glow, wanted to glow. She concludes this work with hermeneutics: "To give heat is within the control of every human being." To change registers from impossible speech to the heat of the living subject is typical of this work's heuristic prolusion, which, while courting seemingly incommensurate perspectives, makes of these one imaginative domain. Indeed, the way Wolsak commands powerful visions says a great deal about the heat of her imagination in creating this word art. George Quasha, in his brilliant introduction to her volume of collected poetry, Squeezed Light, comments on how all her work is a work of poetics and principle, inseparable from the work itself. Lissa's work, he writes, is deeply founded on principle. She is a poet everywhere tracking the emergence of a poetic principle. Quasha writes that Lissa, quote, challenges readerly identity as it forms in reading her work, and she does this by keeping us inside poetic movement while pushing us out to one edge or another. Lissa takes words as concepts and concepts as words and turns these into political, social, psychological, and religious provocations. Most recently, the concept of Eigenface, as in the title of her book, of beings alone, the Eigenface, and LIGHTSAIL in her most recent book, LIGHTSAIL. Each of these word concepts would require considerable commentary on my part to begin to address the multiplicity of domains that Lissa engages. How powerfully and expertly she turns these concepts into her speak, her poetry. So rather than continuing, I will instead hand over the mic to Lissa. Lissa.
Thank you profusely, Jean. That was swoony. And welcome to all of you. It's astonishing for me to be in this living room, which is a blessing and a curse, I know. But I'm going to read LIGHTSAIL today, and I'd like to clarify ever so slightly that LIGHTSAIL could be looked at as a gossamer material that, when unfurled in the vacuum of space, feels the pressure of sunlight and propels by said pressure. It's a kind of deep sky wandering, i.e., the imagination par excellence, but it has its footing in actual fact. Insofar as since I discovered the word, 8 years ago or so, I now know that there are things such as LIGHTSAILs out there in deep space, real ones. Okay. This work is a work of primordial imaging and moreover a feeling for the meaning of the sounds present in the minds of people. And this was written about 3 years ago. And it is dedicated to Peter O'Leary, who's present. I'm happy to say. Yeah, for Peter. I was going to read a Meister Eckhart, but instead, I want this to begin. This is from Emily Dickinson. To help our bleaker parts, salubrious hours are given, which if they do not fit for earth, drill silently for heaven. Had we said we finally glimpsed our repetitious nature? Through a blur of tears, we trace our depths using telepathic tinctures. No sooner we chained down against you in opposite fields. Even imaginatively, this was not the liberty, but only a weighing of Illuminati. As all atomic rays between fingers we felt as ash. For we who leave no trace, the ones peopled here in their eagerness to cross a chasm as truculent fury, picking up a molten bubble of peach glow glass and glowing mercurially, almost laying hold of the inky darkness, then fell to wishing. Already knowing one mother's presence extenuates and funnels, estranged lifespans come to tell us, reflecting upwards her speckled lamp. Labor to listen. Understanding the suchness of our geocide, suffering in broken-hearted humility, we sought an aftermath to stave beauty and its feast. Teeming with ingenious vulgarities, the very utmost affectation, our time trap vainly invented and hellishly weighted, we sow into its nucleus. Finitesimal locked signals, merciless. Our guardians wheedled and whipped on. The vanishing point most visibly embodies its high crime, each other driven into some august biogunk. Death-like, we knew, we lived, whirling away our intimacy, piercing it roughly. Love evades composure. The gaze turning back on the gaze, hip to knowing the origins of betraying and belonging, which, as to its essence, its living impress flopping out of its visual axis. Paroxysms, frenzy, keeping pace to furnish that genius inability. Hidden in that scene, subduing, self-reclining, then floating in midair, converting to hard light. Playing singed instruments and to implicate heaven, look again upon a touch hole, all bent above. Not far from us, thins away, each flaw moving, yanking, aerially to hum an already voluble casuistry, then rising to confer impressions of causality with glee intertwined. The finitudes are solitudes, though forefelt and foreknown. Motionless hearts fall back into the coat. We rose in relation to a holographic veil. Elsewhere, the revelatory cause of pleasure derives from a hideously beautiful, supersensuous impulse, gently conceiving a time-like interval, an acoustic hollow movement, and our affinity to play, to recreate the moist ledge of nature. A given beneath kinetic depth effects, you the lightener, you the loosened, an intrigueur, gasping to rarefy them, to culture an audience, the singularity, its atmospheric warp, already past is holy. The last of the dins to appear beginninglessly came, not mistime. Mistime. Is not this a spell? Entrust to us the speaking silence, the soul's conversation. Umbilic, viewed in man-made light, we the said, our telling, our told, witnesses and actor within being, ready to break off the delusion, its attempted usurpation of insight. Women began to whisper to be heard. The apparition found a way to vector depth cues and things of naught, twinning the field, times then passing back the suffering of another. The human frame in open air on the beam, we too interpose and nestle up to smattering gamma rays, reaping ideas. She, transpossessed, instinctively pulled 3 cards out of her tucked stocking without help or art. His holding was the fabric of his body. Love in anguish, its null fringe pinching off fire. As far as sitting together, middle space, revamp, citizen. It's all somehow too winsome. If hearts dissimulate, perversely bent, we jackknife cold through death's blowtorch, escaped but alone, feigning vivacity, all the while arm in arm, jocose, nodding to the fall. Then, in a frightened form of realism, ones of us eased into the vortex of reverie, maddeningly. We jive nightly if the devil is interested. Those for whom power is lackluster, where the inspirer in the tense is the giver made to make curious, lay lovers flooding the field, dictates to its luminous core. Ceaseless and granitic, its arcane fear, its speary non-locality, and elsewhere foments. You have held a certain evanescence at bay, passing with a reflex hammer to shun light, the splendor in any act of our own setting, watchful, awaiting, an aperture for sensing our clearing. Denuding to make sense of their lassitude, witnessing ourselves, I saw you. Color puncture, bluing, quiet, when in our wild sister or her semblance, eyeing the place hung above the flickering hour when comes a wordless interstellar agape. Mouth-like lies of selfhood, as if limbs in space crossing our minds, we listen beyond fundamentalisms and self-endearment. Even incognito, we never could force love. And never did love, approaching cessation, not meet its causes. Its hand broadcast seeds float free, fly apart on the moment of being sacrificed. Stillness entrancing the arcs, using a third field, stretch themselves, attempting to claim the swallow's legendary charm. Lulling, childlike, we quiesce in formless union, overlapping horizons, throwing our heads back, we slow into the pools of our third eye. Stung with grief, those wounded digits in your chalk bag belong to all who fund rose and defray, marish into the sprue gates. We suffered as much from rapacious laws as from crime. Tell me, on the obvious, in all openness with the refracting impotence we centered and centered, droll inside our faintest utility, we pass ourselves off as path-breaking aesthetes. Our history of wrath, its absence of imagining, expanding on the ground to call on torpid earth, all its most vulnerable at the mercy of bottomless others sent from the slit. Slowly we fear our insights at death, waiting to say with different intonation we never could love. Only a vague sentience discerned the watery gleam of its stump. Men, women, sex, mimicry, if not braving the void alone, then elevating pervasive hatred, we, locked, equally betrayed. As we went, our sensuous hands wrung in horror of some captious obedience. An equality of listening through the middle space, quails in wheat whose heads are shorn, mob think in error, misrecognizes and misinterprets agape as eros, sleeves of fire, exhaling bees to cavil on over steams of fragrant, shapeless romanticisms, its leafy fluve. When not at home on the shore, its neighboring air distinguished into a terse blend of sighs, any moral soul closing up wounds, then foreseeing and whirring on the spot. First we speak, then laughing. The musky observer too, aloof, becomes prismal or a last standing wave, fluorite violet. Only from some polyphonic care and mattering, quaking inducements of human enchantment, not given to possessed nuns, our commonness captive from there where it is locked, foregathering, then leaving behind our rabid part, auto-presencing, though still wanting and overmastered. Taking the stairway, we can speak face à face, the two of us, tremulous, the manner of being as wrought behind congealed insights. We touch not, while day long we want our young to bring rest from full hands or bounded states. And then drops the chaperone to present the age, relinquishing its galls with odium. Government wheedles and whips on the jetty along our death line, cowling and creeping in, sing-song, bristling afresh. One by one, pugnacious, malignant, fought the people, too dumb to grasp on, out of the raz. Throughout the lingual encrustation it is, if the hyper-secret is our part in this world of manifest hiddenness, for seconds only, peace felt as a sweet backbeat. Our will to will, reading not words, but intent. Just a sec here. There. Reading not words, but intent. Lives lives within the supernal impulse of an echo, falling silent in transport. Necked down into a single field, the noise of Chronos, the weightlessness of Kairos, our sidewinding pair, though when robbed of agency, secrecy drags its ever-lengthening chain, pleased with the taste of wrath at its lips, all gimlet-eyed, felt the sad asp. If this is to replace you, show open palms, its poise. Come forth unhurt. As glutinous epizoons and elite gamblers rue us, piffed as a lurid mass, empiricists from the shafty tomb of Hermes are antinomies, isopietistic, swag-bellied as a crazed sack of snakes unerringly surged forth. You give your word with no face to carry across that relentless holy smile, nor feel the Sitzkrieg eerily form. Living up lone, states of counterpoise to mirror wit, the apology went nowhere. Indulgent meadow naps into our uncommon future silently did we run our fingers through pan-percipient ideas in delicate chromaticisms, our will to love. A gnosis of intimacy succumbing to its order in long cycles of epiphanies close upon our companions, all sought the primitive nucleus with instinct, began to waypoint. Changed from piteously emulating hope and the quality of being gentle, reducing magnitudes to the mere play of misfortune, then craving illusion, saw some of the beloveds appear on byways within oceanic reveries. On the point of vanishing, she appeared to us just as in pre-space-time. Then cosmopoetically, one by one, searingly imaginative ideas of elevation and inventiveness, and again, when alone, in highly colored shadow, she appeared to us in classical solemnity. All during which there is no pure grasp, keeping the warmest utterance in reserve, oppugning, estranging, falling afoul. Thereafter, every sense weeps and returns, subdued on some lunisolar tide in the manner of late night statements so far ago, while soft spotting play and seeing themselves within noetically eke to fit the souls. To tip the tongue's subjectivities, if ever affected by love only, having compassed its onset, the personhood alongside extends us mystagogically and for the tiniest stakes. For the habitué's inheritance, a kind of doming over, suddenly raises them to sit, laying themselves open, only to slip on even slyer dogmas, as if quintessence was sable-vested, tucked into incontinent sadisms. Grappling to read a heat map, the gibbons reaching for the moon, manifesting flying awareness. Stilly, his guard down, and stirring fans, a poor chimp expiates his mysterious sin. Although the veil, together with the other, spread out beyond their promise, the bow of speech, a pulse, water, forest, sounding along with those far out into the seedbed mist, being led on by their trance, the wounds of all oblivion deep. Using telesthesia, pulse trawling, and intrapsychic diktat to place ourselves entirely there, turning, when theophanic light looked in, a veil ascending thus, were we indivisible, for neverness gave rise to creaturely pigment. Then letting the light sail, that which we could not inwardly express yet, no one person stood in our way. Spellbreaker, using energy and momentum, what of the extravagant gentilities? The more we feared being co-eternal, the more we cyclically deranged our defenses as far as this life enthroning hate, and yet to pause its privations. Why, none of our thoughts, none of our theatrics, and most of our love's afterlife already menacing, we who we once were, oh, I'm sorry, that's it. And most of love's afterlife already menacing who we once were, watch in vain. Timelessly leaving behind odious gravities, our days flit. By largesse, we resituate our scale. Here too, tensely drawn, we aerially pale. In ripening cataracts, the globe's resplendence coming behind them, wanting pluck and dominion over felt senses, and elsewhere humiliated and suffering throughout. Some went on propitiating as if truculent lovers, as is the cosmic habit, setting their imprint. Bosch's butt song, fuzzing night, its walnut loam, trespassing preternaturally. Careful ignorance to keep reconciliation with swiveling rage, throne rays fell chimerically, blow zen. Rethinking static, rethinks expansionist grandeur, peeled of its hair, and the cathexes desired to make something spit new for nothing. We attempt over again, though teeming, to submerge influence, co-conscious through another's gate. And a quote from Edgar Wind, "Death less terrible than men." The premise hereafter, leaving the trail meanwhile to a slumber far murkier in burning tombs. The marsh fog curls to the quick, bitter other, wave bands, a hideous torment toward us coming. Upwelling, a citizen creates a miniature image of herself and a wild mango by open-focused free blowing into the air. In that instant, witting upon the eloquent loveliness of material, she turns her back to liberate a small equine from her bag. All along the earth, solemn, admiring then, magnifying the embodiment of agape, the risk of gentle minds drawing us, hypostatic through the wave, sovereign and on a flyby, people fleeing on sunlight, drenched and bellying in the flush atmosphere, deploy gossamer photon sails. Even though only tracelet, they mingled minds in everlasting memory. The sudden raying out formed a forgetful chiliocosm, too arch and war-laced and colonizing one by one, wantonly dub or characterize all others. Having met the fruit, I see your confusion. The undertaker's blot, in all severity emptied of weary mannerisms, pursy mouths honor. It should not seem a marvel that by coiling there, entropy's sluggish billow, like a dune, falls prey to inert uniformity. How learning halts in poignant strikes. It is sometimes a free citizen who, inured and listless, turns most fervently slavish. No one knows what induces them, an orb of night, or this watery star, as if mental seedlings place hope elsewhere, yet even the vanishing eels climb the hindered harmonic fields open to reflecting pools. Pictorial oxygen in a cosmically extended Dirac sea. Covering ourselves in tears, we bypass the heart's specter. For time did purge away our mist lenticular cloud in appeals or rareness, withdrawing its hissing aurora, sphere upon sphere, countless lost souls who menace touchy subjects, echoing, awash and themselves sheathed, dished into fear holes. That in severing creativity and self-revelation, we obliterate dimensionality from one source, creativity, demand war in ludicrous hegemonies, anathemata, a mouth tinder of ill-lit torpors turns ugly. Seeing us descend along a willow-lined towing path, flickering beyond my sight, I still watch for you. Companions wailing to eviscerate in kind, to humble our fear and quieted by our Punic past, that they each time receive a guise, yet obliterate or whelm in the void core, way-weary, fire, the seas superimposed in a bodiless cause of all causes. We perished from love's usurious runnel. The neck, almost over the line, he trembled, grasping with the eyes on under-finessed ground, one-handed, eight-handed. We squandered our utmost primal secret to make love. For the sakes of touching concord, sublime suspense, plucking death's strings, the slinky suspect mocks our grasp, then mistook Eros in what seemed spoofing our infinite inward muffles. Such a coil. Must we use dead languages with doomed ideas, piezoelectrically speaking? Before us, the flexuous air. Is it me or you? Occult without being. Occulto, prevent something from being seen. Occlusus, closed shut, held back, unable to move, barely stretching forth for our lopped off hands gurgle in our throats. Newly slipped the leash. Once we were the people facing, we were never merciful. Hellhounds, how little dabs, properties of fundamental space, pre-reflectively turn us. Force instinct and dispersion, our supernal ideas of substance, what awaits, unvanquished behind imperious, fiendish savagery. Bending equally, both cold shouldering and the surprising deluge of veneration. So many yawning goblets suffice. Unable to grasp causes or opposites, breezing past in a lunar swing by, as extended light, a divine spark, an open presence began to reflect on ego death, aghast. Its blue funk of immortality and the consummate innocence of its slain. Pis-aller. Pacific, the rub, wriggling largely in those words, greatly fatted in spluttering ply called data. Now the only emergent landmass. At the arch, we could have stopped our entrance. As you have felt, that of them, no one knows why nihilism or industrialized love arises as more than borrowed scenes, or how secrecy became one's church of lifeless diffraction. The else that fled alone. You must know it, still giggling bedside, magnetism's funerary urn, its harvest of death throes, and only this one self-snaring dupes the beating heart of both. After all, instinctually, weeping with you, the mother stands. Stabat mater, which when full of tears reveals veiled divine potentia, playing forth polyphonies, tonally chording through dimensionality's vastness, sun-glad hues, love and culture, my dunes, voiced yet perpetually escape. Instead, we all wanted to let go, this reptilian nowhere, relentlessly herniating close upon its beatific psychophysics. Apart sprang the utterer's gleam, rhythmically paraphrasing, who, in reluming the fizz gig, both candescent, pollinating light and august ear and rasping speaker, offset, sequent, everywhere splinter fire, on return, gnomic blushes, infer and betray one another without caution. Some apprehension keeps us over amping, loud in saying so. Gains and losses breathe. How this also ended in electromagnetic delirium, to vivify where they had then shimmied to become cold fire. So it was, to strip the bells of their sound. We, awaiting the numinous conversation that never arose. And for that, which made the body weaken its opiated tenor, its public crib mind, its entirety to be wanting, walk on by, noli me tangere. For rolling the egghead from havens here and there wields idolatry, and by such essencelessness, like insects, uses a storm to breed. In its midst, making again the sinewy usuries, these toils missing the curvature undersensed ahead. Blood throng, drawing bleary circles there. They burn with a moody, inverted reverence. But when given sleep, I thought them foundering, fog drip on quiet steeps, far on the gloaming telluric anathema, cutting the vermilion waves. I heard a soft whistling, a rustling sound, inducing murmurs. Our entrance, a private parley, to will. We first felt kinesthesis toward understanding, never to return to mere agreement. Co-moving as it was, so was it here. Our eyes stood loose. The delicate stranger hues trembling, unopposed, into its substance, and turning to it, our subjects led us naturally with feeling and intimations as ephemeral ropes of sand, relentlessly light-like, unafraid of motion. Shrill and too bright the tipstaff, tetrahedronally sacred, our mutilated natures do care. Late visions knit ahead of each other's push hand, translucent pathways grown reedy with minutes to impart, the susurrance superluminal in making eye contact in a private house or by funneling, inflecting to the eared. Suppose the leper went on or broke through, using zero energy ontology, easing the symbiosis, making and ruling out her own name, wanting physiocracy to plummet its omnipotent, cloying putties, go almost unseen or forsaken. For being to intensify, She withdrew into intimacy, fathoming primes. To iridesce against the vagaries and transmigration, she grew roses to provide optical cavities, affording ambiguity, which animates co-mercy, capable of the cosmos, people knowing everything at once. Against bossisms, we venally admit in blood cement, drained from mortals, jaguara, just this night sun, a firelock, its sway, wailing hypnotically with force and lies, maniacally deadens the bridge. Pulsating, a gust of jubilance, imminence without guile, the leopard longs for mammalness. Cause or curvature on the waterfront, hacky-sacking, eucalyptus, innocuous in shimmering pats of light. Love is a guest, listening. Animals breathe in the tears. We see orangely an exhibit of graceful tendencies, butterflies about her neck. Then with equal vision dwelt at the schism of class fury, found in its state of utmost weariness, the assembly spoke on the harangue of pure logic, said wonder stems from the light alone, splendor getting the jump on repetition. And you saved them, the adamantine bootlegs, who let those who prosper afford to converse. Who then cried aloud their spiritual anorexia with a fawning belief in the domestic circle, now abased with little to enamor us, the inspirer disfigures her magnification. In a transensate tongue, freeze the glance. Our lives became a twee series of little notes. If when we stellate, ontic light, the heat of genius found cherishingly sunning foods, longing infused the room. Effusions defiled then, flicking the spores, the betrayed mind circles, its own artifacts, the niggling, iconic necropolis, thinks. Not from broken-hearted humility, but from the nescient love of helpless infidelities, given over to the trampling. I, you, vortextually immersed in the sadness of the names. Forsake those frank dreamboats bellowing out their reinvested fleshes, urbane catalepsy, redues. The stricken repose, time porn, succubi, effervesce, and fly the spoils to workshops. One's innermost word, nowhere is it absent, yet with an inert immediacy, despots pulse over pure surface or lying flashbacks, for it flatters them to do so. A flume, hereon, its melisma, its yielding sinkhole, handlessly thwarting desire, whispering moral schemas, else effacing the source of free energy with concocted zeals and fervors, the several stupidities and the duce ravishing to fructify a slung illusion of depth, a circling wave. The sophist, foregoing the distortion that results in cults, staggers all, but never fear one more who plies a psychospherical sigh into his quiet little knoll, and thought not for deathless fame. In summoning hexaity, we sieve the ocean for bestial slime deemed as dung, those who war for an arch enemy, even eerier, and which are perforce oligarchic, eats its children as if novices in front of a cobra, the socius recused. As they scapegoat telescopically to outplay at such a remove, demisting fears of death, no thing more brutal than this, the block now truffling with a wave on a string, as is the poisoner's wont. Perpetual this violinistic struggle, trap scars, immensities larger than our kind. If ever a mysterious little white bird fled to poise, white clouds, red leaves, immerse. A fleet of loving kites, a sponge gold moth kiss, moonglade, the whole heart paced with light. The Eleatic stranger and I, his disbelief begun amidst tingling blizzards, violently lit. As lived, the ingenium unwillingly slid into cliche, language impaled by its most vacuous nature, but still the bait ball holds. The face of all faces, transfixed in hierarchy, from which we finesse nothing, even before the blowpipe, in human axes loomed. Circumambiently, moiling, we came close. So stood the mother. She, the non-unveiling, omic genius of inner spheres. She, with uncanny muscle, reveals the crucible, then presses gently against it. Because the artists lied, flash tongue, everting their lips, then they sat down, friends to no one, resting on a buoyant moment, mimetic illusion, in potentia deflecting, fear for sovereign peoples, forced to pierce themselves as if real or phantom foes quilled in thou-less foment. Some self-cherishing wingtips with private armies unfazed stand gladiatorially without sorrow, distress, or grief, as if genocide were an amusing side effect, totally, tidally locked above. With our breath prints, we stood aside. Longissima via, a long spiritual journey of monstrous explorations in each other's flesh, a comorbid bent. In cult-making phantasmagoria, we failed spatially, being force-fed in absence of eros, bears the breadth of its porch light, the brightest point of the planet, only drawing to itself sense experiments in misfolding love. As found on the seabed, driven by so-so tendencies, spent in numerous exiles, most moved away from frisson of a hideous, zipped-up schist, saturated patois, and how it got to us. Thus by degrees, to leaping tools, what one hears when silent. No one wanted outside. We began to rave and flee a certain hush. All people living behind blinds faced an unburied corpse. An invariant mass emotes, propounding nothing, nothing, only hierarchy. How dwelling on incandescence at the edge of superconsciousness, we became divine, latent gestures. We quit self-circling and unambiguously made lightnings of our eyes, split wind. Not remotely through force, but by engaging kairos and quiddities flung across centuries. Warmth, sun, then easing onto the photons, light sailing, night surf, coved plumes, arcs. Again in light sail, operations of soul on a wild dash. A gentleness beguiles us. We quietly continue, interfuse with an infinite metacosm. Tindered in, panspermiana, a supernal horizon, smothered and affixed, many thought, ruses overhead. By using cacophony, its gaseous incessance rippling with words, asphyxiated earth. Silts fall, somewhere between a fumy hollow of hand and the barrens. Some blindness stemmed from being too close. Our perceptual quest, limblessly absenting ourselves in an incorporeal curve, unconfessed telepathies, caught a pilot wave gyromagnetically. Ineffable inner space bursting with liberty, a sense to the loss of its footing from within. Filaments unite, the cadence too effervescent to arrest. We brought ourselves no longer needing patterns and mystically understood. Feeling no need to settle on a surface, we led vision beyond Earth's vermilion gold, awaiting the hummingbird lanced out of night sky. Insight junkies evoke the intimacy of home, again in potentia. How phenomenon at one and iconically. Our acts of light, our hierosophies fall upon an omnipresence, prisming, transmundane. Where could we consider them as belonging, unorbed? We wondered if our mothers came this way, not yet the first lattice sailing or beam sailing. Syzygy's witness, loose genetic materials, a divine magnet, and the multiplying presence of the unified field. And that's it. Thank you so much.